question of what is mental health is often not asked. And that's because we're really good at pathologizing things. We understand a great deal of things through the lens of pathology, but it's hard for us to answer the question, what is mental health? The field of interpersonal neurobiology actually seeks to answer that question. And it goes something like this. First of all, interpersonal neurobiology is a field that emerged about 15 years ago under the leadership of a guy named Dan Siegel, as a psychiatrist on the West Coast. And it is a field that really seeks to look at the intersection between, putting it just quite straightforward, between what's going on from a neurophysiologic perspective and relationships. How do the brain and relationships intersect with each other? And how might we describe and understand what it means like when the brain and relationships are flourishing maximally? And so if we were to look at all the different groups of people who study and who have a stake in the notion of the mind, right? I mean, like, if you don't have a course in the mind, it'd be like going to see your orthopedic surgeon and they've never like actually worked with the skeleton. That would be strange, right? That would be concerning. So if you haven't had a course in the mind, we'd like to know that, gosh, if that's what I do, we'd like to know that I actually have some idea about what the mind is that we're working with. And so interpersonal neurobiology would describe the mind like this. We would say that the mind is an embodied and relational process that emerges from within and between brains, whose task it is to regulate the flow of energy and information. You got that? Yeah. Lying to me. The mind is an embodied and relational process that emerges from within and between brains, whose task it is to regulate the flow of energy and information. Now, we could spend an hour just unpacking that, but what I want to say is this, that we'll say just briefly, so the mind is not just my brain, right? Because how do you know that you're anxious? You know that you're anxious when your heart rate goes up and your palms are sweaty because your body has to tell you things. But we also know that your mind isn't just your body, because we know that when you're born, newborns come into the world with about 30% of their neural activity intact and ready to go. About 70 to 80% of their neural activity, if it's going to reach maturity, requires the interaction with another human relationship in order for that to happen. This leads to, of course, the work around research in attachment, for those of you who might be familiar with that, and how attachment shapes the way your neural networks are going to come together and fire. Relationships are shaping your brain activity, they're shaping your relationships all day, every day, even when you're asleep. And so the mind then becomes this relational, embodied exchange. But what does flourishing look like? And we'd say flourishing looks like this. If you look at any system at all, not just living systems, but non-living systems that are flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, and stable, which are 5 pretty good words that would describe systems that we think are working pretty well. Those systems demonstrate at least 2 qualities. The first quality is that each of the subparts of these systems are what we would call well differentiated. If you have an orchestra, you want to see a symphony? The symphony has, we'll say, 4 different parts, right? You've got your woodwinds, your strings, your brass, your percussion. And we'd like to know that each of these different systems are well differentiated. Like each of these know their parts really well, right? But we would also like to know that not only are they differentiated, but they are linked effectively to each other. They're linked effectively to each other. And what that means is that they're going to know that sometimes the percussion gets to play, sometimes the strings get to play. They're going to have to play paying attention to each other, and they need a conductor for that. And we would say that in our brains, we have all these different parts of the symphony. And we need a prefrontal cortex in order for those parts to come together, for them to be both well differentiated and well linked. And those systems that flourish, those systems that are integrated, are systems that are effectively differentiated and linked. But here's the thing with human beings. I'd like to believe that I can do all these things by myself. I'd like to believe that I can go from birth to age 56, where I am now, and I can accomplish all the things that I need to accomplish by myself. In fact, we live in a culture that would lead you to believe that that, in fact, is what you've been doing. And it's not true. because your brain can't do it by itself. And so we would say that in order for my prefrontal cortex really to develop effectively, it needs the presence of other people's cortexes as well that are also trying to do the very same work. And so mental health, in fact, is not the absence of pathology, it's the presence of effectively differentiated and linked systems. And for human brains, human minds, it means that I am only going to be as effectively integrated myself as I am integrated with you. I need interaction with you in order for my mind to effectively become what I want it to be. So when we ask the question, what does it mean for when people are depressed and people are anxious and all these kinds of things, we would then take a look at, well, to what degree are they not very well differentiated? To what degree are they not very well linked, not just within the activity of their own minds, but between themselves and other people?